Good afternoon, everybody. Of course, that is indeed, if it is the afternoon where you are, it's definitely the afternoon in London because it's 5 o'clock, and it's the early evening in Germany where our guest, Chris, is joining from this evening. Chris, do you want to say hello to everybody?
So, hello, everyone. My name is Chris. I'm very happy to be here.
So Chris works with Humanitec, and he's going to be talking this evening about what the fuck is an internal developer platform. Now, for those of you who are regulars at the What the Fuck It Is, you know that there's a few things we need to get to first. One of them is housekeeping. And the housekeeping is kind of limited to the following. There is a code of conduct. The code of conduct asks you to be respectful to each other. Don't be... Well, I fluffed this. I fluffed the code of conduct, Teresa. The code of conduct, of course, asks you to be respectful and to be respectful and mindful that of other people's ethnicity, sexual orientation, and things like this. Teresa will put the link to the full code of conduct into the chat box now or in a few minutes. If you need to use this code of conduct for yourself, you can copy it. It's open source. You can copy it, edit it, and use it as you like. In terms of questions, you can ask questions all the way through the webinar. They will be answered either in real time, if appropriate, or they'll be answered at the end. When Chris is speaking, Adam and Teresa will monitor the channel, making sure that the questions come to him in a timely fashion. Ask whatever questions you like, and if you're feeling brave, you can unmute yourself and ask the question yourself. Other bits of housekeeping, actually, I think that's it. Teresa, have I missed anything?
No, this was perfect. One thing, sorry. We are recording this session also. So if somebody, has an issue with that, just let us know and we can cut you out of your name or, just blur your name, etc. Thank you.
So, yeah, indeed. If you've got any objections to the recording, please let us know and we can blur you out later. We're not going to stop recording, so if you've got a massive issue with it, you probably have to leave. But otherwise, let us know and we'll blur you out thereafter. And of course, I am joined by two partners in gossip, Adrian and Leanne. Hello, Leanne. Good evening.
Hello.
You're not Leanne.
Leanne stayed quiet, so I said hi.
I clearly said good evening, Leanne. Well, okay. Hello, Adrian.
Okay. By the way, partners in goss makes it sound like me and Leanne are gossiping behind the back all the time.
That's all you ever do.
Which is true, but
yeah,
public.
That's all you ever do on Slack. Okay, Adrian, and how are you today? How are you today, mate?
I'm good. I'm good.
I think sunny up in Scotland.
Yeah, it's quite bright. Actually, quite a clear day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
nice.
quite bright down here in London as well. Okay, good. Right, before we get into the talk, then let's just do a few announcements. Let's see what's coming up. Oh, of course, after it is very late here in London. I'm a bit tired. Housekeeping, then there's going to be some announcements, and then everybody's favourite section, What the Fuck is the Gossip, with Leanne and Adrian, and then we're going to go straight into What the Fuck are internal developer platforms with Chris and Adam. So let's get cracking. You can subscribe to our newsletter if you want to. The newsletter provides people with videos, blogs, essays, information sheets, and all things like that. It's a pretty non-intrusive newsletter. It will arrive in your inbox. You will not get an email from a salesperson. If you do, send the email to me with the salesperson attached. There will be consequences. We're not a spammy company. You can also follow us on Twitter and read the newsletter every month without subscribing, because most of us will share it anyway. It is a good way to keep ahead of all the news in the unfolding and ever-changing world of cloud native. Second big announcement, our book is free. Nobody was buying it, so we thought we might as well just give it away. That bit was not actually true. Some people do buy it, a couple of 100 copies per month, but it's really important to our work. So our customers enjoy reading it. It's a big part of our pre-sales process, and everything we do is laid out in the first couple of chapters of the book. So right now you can read the cloud native patterns in one place, you can read our TDBR method in another. Alternatively, you can download the book and read everything at the same time. If you do enjoy the book and you want to go and buy it, that's great. Make sure you leave a review, right? We've only got, it's really difficult for me because there's only about 5 reviews and Adrian's got like 50. This is a real problem for me. And it's affecting our relationship. So just be mindful of that. We're hiring. Of course, we're hiring. 4.9 out of 5 on Glassdoor container solutions. It's literally the highest rated, I think, cloud native company in the world in terms of working conditions. Promotion chances, flexibility, remote working. Awesome CEO. Actually, that last bit I made up because there is a section that says CEO rating, 0 votes. 0 votes. Nobody cares. Cloud native engineers, we are all remote. It doesn't matter where you are. Time zones matter. You need to be in America and you need to be in Europe. And we're shifting out a little bit towards the east. We are a little bit bound by time zones, but we at least operate in maybe 3/4 of the world. SREs, cloud native engineers, just check it out there. And that concludes our announcements. And now we're going to do a couple of bits of gossip. Is Leanne back?
Yes,
Yeah.
I am back.
Wow.
Yeah, literally you started talking and my computer just went, nuh-uh, I'm not putting up with that. So, but I made it back.
So very sorry to your computer. I know your computer thinks I'm the Piers Morgan of the cloud native world. Okay.
That's good reason.
Gossip.
Yeah. Gossip.
Who's going first?
Right.
Are you going first, Leanne?
I guess I'm going first now. So this headline I did not make up. I just have to say the French fire fogs the cloud, because I'm just not creative enough to come up with such an amazing alliteration. But this story is about OVH Cloud, which I didn't know existed before the story broke yesterday. So OVH Cloud is a global service provider for managed bare metal, for cloud services, and they also have dedicated servers that you can rent. And actually quite big. So apparently they have over 1.5 million customers. And yesterday they had a huge fire in one of their data centers in Strasbourg in France. You can see I'm like natively French, which was, it affected 2 of their data centers, SPG 2 and SPG 1. SPG 2 has been completely destroyed apparently by the fire, and part of SPG 1 has also been affected. But luckily there were no casualties, everyone was safe. So that's, I think, the most important story of this. And so basically their founder went to Twitter and immediately said, we would recommend for you to activate your disaster recovery plans. So, like, even though you might have put things into the cloud, it's still somewhere. It still physically needs to live someplace. So you need to also think about, at least local redundancies. You need to think about like backup procedures and disaster recovery like a physical disaster. I think they handled it pretty well, actually. Their CEO also already announced kind of their plan back for the next one to 2 weeks, I think. So yeah, that was the goss from my side.
And
I don't know how this format goes. Do you say anything about it? Yeah.
Leanne, did anybody lose any data? Have websites gone down or applications gone down? Has this caused any business disruption?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know anything specifically. I just noticed that there was one person who hosts a GTA 5 server who was very, very annoyed by it. He was calling them unprofessional because he lost his server. Wow. But I don't think he lost a lot of business from that.
Now, Adrian, I can see you nodding your head. Have you got anything to add to the fire in the cloud?
Yeah, I think a lot of sites went down. A lot of sites had trouble. But I think like a lot of smaller websites, like millions of smaller websites went down, literally millions.
Yeah.
By the way, you've drawn a yellow line across.
I didn't do that. I don't know if somebody's come in and started trolling us by drawing yellow lines. Please don't draw penis, anybody. Don't do this to us.
It says we're
it's
viewing
definitely,
your stream.
Yeah, it's definitely not like the time that I think US Central 1 in AWS went down.
Yeah.
That caused like basically the entire internet to go away. Or
it wasn't
parts
that
of
bad,
them.
yeah.
So it wasn't that bad, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable. Okay, Adrian, what have you got for us? Another alliteration, I see.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so this company called Verkada make CCTV, and they basically 150,000 cameras installed all over the place, and they were hacked. It was a very simple hack, as in somebody found the admin password because it was published online. And they were able to go and look at footage from hospitals, from prisons, police departments, Tesla, and Cloudflare and a bunch of other companies. So you can actually find like sort of stills from, Tesla shop floor and Cloudflare and things like that now, which is it's pretty crazy stuff. And it actually gets even worse because Verkada are quite a advanced company, I guess. So they're doing things with facial recognition and what they call people analytics, which basically lets you say, okay, show me everybody that's male or show me everybody that's wearing yellow clothes or something like that. So you can sort of filter people down. So there's some scary stuff going on there. Yeah, that was about it. Just slightly scary stuff and a very simple hack.
And here we are in 2021, where fires still affect our business, of course, and people are still sticking passwords on Post-it notes on the back of computers.
Yeah, I never quite understood. They said they found it on the internet, but I wasn't, what somebody just posted an admin thing on Reddit. I don't know.
I wonder if it was in a Git repo or something like that.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, okay, thank you everybody for that wonderful gossip. This is always one of my favorite parts of the webinars. And of course, our users do like the gossip because usually when they go to webinars, it's kind of boring. They just get a presentation. When you come to our webinars, you get a few jokes, a few updates, a code of conduct slapped around your head, and you get people like Adrian and Leanne coming in with the gossip of the week. On that note, it is with considerable pleasure that I am trying to stop drawing on my own screen. It's with considerable pleasure that I can now introduce my friend and long-running colleague from Container Solutions, Adam Sandor, and our other friend, Chris from Humanitec, who are here this evening to speak about internal developer platforms. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. And thank you, everybody, for coming today. I think this is going to be a really exciting conversation with Chris this evening, because internal developer platforms are, well, let's say, trying to become the new buzzword. And I'm very excited to be there at the birth of a buzzword. And I personally am really interested in this topic because they basically, this new phrase basically describes what we at Container Solutions are doing for years, and we never had such a good word or a good buzzword for it. But first of all, Chris, thank you for coming today. You and your colleagues at Humanitec are the inventors of the internal developer platform phrase, as far as I know. Please give us an introduction of yourself and Humanitec. I know that you started in the industrial compost industry in your professional career, and that brought you to Google somehow, and finally to Humanitec. So that sounds like a very exciting career.
Thanks, Adam. There's some good background research there. Yeah, so my name is Chris. I'm actually CTO here at Humanitec. And Humanitec is a company which provides the way of, well, the fastest way of building your own internal developer platform. So I guess a little bit of background on myself first, and then on Humanitec. So as Adam mentioned, I have a long and varied career, starting off building systems for industrial composting, a brief stint in the insurance industry, doing risk modeling, and then spent 3.5 years at Google working on an internal developer platform, actually at Google, focused on partner-based applications. I was a product manager there, and got the opportunity to work with lots of teams within Google, and especially engineering teams that were trying to build and deploy applications in a very quick manner to provide support for Google's partners. So that gave me a lot of insight into how kind of internal developer platforms work. And obviously at a company like Google, you've got a lot of kind of experience and infrastructure that's been set up to make developers' lives as easy as possible. So jumping to Humanitec, Humanitec has been in the kind of internal developer platform space for a while now, looking at trying to take the kind of concepts that we see large companies already doing, companies like Google, Facebook, Spotify, Airbnb, larger companies are building these things. And the question we asked is, can we bring the same kind of functionality in a kind of prepackaged form to companies that are building cloud native applications, and can we make these accessible and efficient for everyone to use without everyone having to build their own stack from the ground up. So that's kind of where we came in, and we recently got to a stage where our product is kind of mature enough for people to actually use it for its intended purpose. Yeah, I'm very excited to share it with you and also explore internal developer platforms.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So yeah, today's goal is just to basically have a conversation together, dig into into this topic, answer questions from the audience. I have some topics prepared, but we can see where this takes us. First of all, we should define what an IDP is, right? To make it very clear to everyone what your thinking is on this topic, because as all buzzwords go, they never mean the same thing for everybody. So first of all, I'm really curious to see whether the two of us agree on it.
Okay.
So take it away, Chris. What would be your definition?
Okay, so I think if we start off with a kind of 10,000 feet view, an internal developer platform is supposed to be there to improve the developer experience for people working in an organization. So that's the main focus, is on developer experience. Now, what does that mean? That means things like, as a developer, I want to be focused on writing code, and I don't want to be focused on doing things like trying to figure out how to deploy my code, how to set up the infrastructure that's needed for my code to be deployed to, how to figure out how to set up a second environment next to a first environment that I'm using. All of those kind of things are elements that are necessary, especially when we get into the cloud native world, and generally cause development teams to slow down. On the other side of that, you've also got the ops team, who are usually the people who the developers go to say, oh, I need to deploy to this new bit of infrastructure. Can you help me? Or I need you to set up a new environment. Can you create me a new database for my service and make it available in this environment? So the ops teams themselves often end up in this kind of responsive situation. And generally this involves a lot of back and forth, a lot of waiting on each other, and generally a lot of frustration all around. And so the internal developer platform is there to provide some structure, some standardization, but also allows the developers to self-serve and allows the ops people to focus on actually managing infrastructure rather than dealing with tickets from developers on a kind of hourly basis. That's kind of high-level view.
Thank you. So does that mean that, so is like developer self-service a necessary part of this? Or like, because, you know, like I'm thinking a bit historically, the simplest form of a developer platform was like operations setting up a Jenkins pipeline, right? So can that be considered a developer platform, or does there need to be like a self-service component to this?
So I think the first thing to say is that internal developer platforms are not new. They've always existed, but they've had different names and different levels of scope. So if you go like kind of wind all the way back to when we were running on-prem, running on physical servers, maybe the internal developer platform was very thin, but it may have been something like a way of developers being able to log into appropriate servers and then run their own deployments, for example, and some kind of structure to set that up, some kind of rules, some kind of way of working with the ops team would have been your platform. What we see kind of in the cloud native world is that now everything can be driven through APIs, from like provisioning your infrastructure to doing your deployments. We can actually expand that platform and make it into an actual product. So I think that's kind of the key thing about the modern internal development platform, is it's an actual product that's managed internally within an organization. And it provides this developer experience. And I think self-serve is probably a necessary part of that, because without it, then you are limiting the developer experience. So every time the developer has to stop what they're doing and go and file a ticket or go and write a Slack message to someone to get something done, that breaks the flow and reduces the quality of the developer experience. So if we're chasing a good developer experience, I think that self-service is definitely a necessary part of a modern internal developer platform.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's without that, it's all just ticketing basically, and that's also, I think, where you really cross into the difficult part of things, right? Like setting up automated deployments in a cloud native world is actually very, very easy with Kubernetes and whatever, but providing all ops services as a self-service platform is not trivial. And yeah, my basically I agree on this high level view, and I would add to that a bit of the historical view of this is how I saw the emergence of internal developer platforms was really with cloud provider of APIs, and then Kubernetes really turbocharged this, because suddenly, whether like traditionally operations teams came from a sysadmin background, so they didn't really think in terms of APIs and so on. So of course Google did SRE, where more like developer background engineers were also working on these operations things, so that helped. But really, once you start working with something like Kubernetes, there is naturally a platform. It already provides a lot of the services that you need. Interestingly, it's never really enough, because there is always some things that your company specific stuff that you want to build on top of it and so on. But it did help shift the mindset, I think, in many companies who did not have that mindset before, where they were really not even thinking past the ticketing approach, right? Like everybody was fine with this. There was a time when everybody was fine. Also, the developers were fine with this. Even when companies started adopting DevOps, everybody was fine with, now developers and operations work together. So it means we send emails and Slack messages and tickets and whatnot to each other. And then we have meetings about all that. And then we work together, hold hands. So great. And we really, that doesn't work so well to improve productivity. We really need to take that next step where everything is really automation, and the ops team needs to be basically the product team of the internal platform. Yeah. So that's why I'm really excited to finally put a name on this, because in a way, GitOps kind of hijacked this. Like we label a lot of things GitOps these days, but GitOps is really an implementation detail on how you build, how you would build an internal developer platform. So it's a much wider scope term, which I really like. So one very interesting question about internal developer platforms is really the landscape. What's out there really, and because so from our perspective, and we're consultants at Container Solutions, so we help companies build things, right? So for us, it comes natural that you build your own internal developer platform, which from the tools you have and so on. You guys, on the other hand, are building a product. You're trying to productize, which I must admit, if you succeed with that, is much more efficient than building your own thing. So how do you guys see this evolution? How much of this can be productized? What's the competition also? What's the landscape here?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting thing to look at. So I think one thing to just talk about before we dive into specifically internal developer platform is a very closely related concept, which is platform as a service. So this is, some people will refer to internal developer platforms as a service, if that makes any sense. Basically, the idea is that you're using your own infrastructure and providing a PaaS-like experience to your developers. So if we take an example of a PaaS that probably quite a few people are familiar with, like a Heroku, that is a kind of vertically integrated stack. It's very easy to get started. The developer experience is pretty good, at least when you start out and you want to get your first application up and running. And it provides a lot of the kind of functionality that people would like to see in their own organizations. But for whatever reason, they're not using Heroku or they're not using equivalents. they're having to run their own infrastructure, either for legacy reasons, for technical reasons, for compliant reasons. There's lots of reasons why you have to build and manage your own infrastructure. Now, historically, the burden of managing that infrastructure ends up falling on the ops team and the dev team, with the situation we've talked to before, which is people sending tickets to each other or sending Slack messages to try and coordinate to get things moving and get things working. So everything is kind of ad hoc, and you end up with a lot of kind of friction in this process. What happened probably in kind of the early to late like 2000s, 2010 timeframe is that the large tech companies really kind of decided that this wasn't the way forward. So there were two main approaches. You've already mentioned Google with its SRE approach. They basically decided that what they would do is productize the operations of running their systems. And so they ended up building, for example, Borg, which is the precursor to Kubernetes. And that was around mainly reliability initially. So how do you run stuff where servers fail and the application doesn't fail? How do you make sure that if a data center goes down, everything still works for the customers as much as possible? And then you had the other kind of view, which was Amazon, who said, well, actually, we've got all of this infrastructure and currently everything's ad hoc. Let's create a strict API layer across this. And there's a famous kind of directive that went out from Jeff Bezos saying that everything has to be an API. You're not allowed to go and access data from other people's databases. You're not allowed to jump into other people's networks anymore. You have to do everything through an API. And what those two approaches kind of led to is a form of internal development platform for those companies themselves. So Google ended up with Borg as a standard for running containerized workloads. They were doing this 20 years ago and at scale. And at Amazon, it turned into AWS, where they said, hey, actually, we have something really cool, and we just want to sell it to everyone else because we think it's much better than what's out there. So those, you could think of those as kind of two early internal development platforms. Now, the Google one stayed in-house, and the AWS one turned into the first mass cloud provider. And you know, at the early days of AWS, you could have considered it as your internal development platform. It provided developer self-serving. As a developer, I can spin up a resource I need. Do I need an S3 bucket? Great, I can just call the API and create an S3 bucket. I don't need to go and talk to an ops team to do that, and so on. And so that's kind of an early kind of rough and ready version. What we see as things progress is that the cloud environment has got more mature. We've got other players coming in. You've obviously got Google came in, Azure came in, and we've got also the likes of Alibaba Cloud and these other big, probably less well known in kind of Europe and US providers, but they actually cover a lot of infrastructure that's actually out there. And what happens is that people started standardizing on things. So whereas originally all of the cloud providers had their own APIs and their own ways of doing things, eventually you end up with standardization. And so the first big standardization was Docker. So everyone's like, oh, okay, as long as we can use a kind of standardized container format, then things can move around. And then container orchestration, you may remember there used to be something called Mesosphere. People still use Docker Swarm, but nowadays it seems to be standardizing around Kubernetes. And so what we're getting is a relative kind of cloud agnostic setup. This means that companies no longer have to build things to match their own infrastructure. So remember, Google was building stuff because there wasn't anything out there and it matched their internal implementation. The same with Amazon. But what you can do now is say, well, if I'm deploying a workload to Kubernetes, then actually it doesn't matter if I'm running this Kubernetes in Azure on AKS. It doesn't matter if I'm running this Kubernetes in AWS on EKS. It actually doesn't even matter if I'm running it on-prem, maybe even running a bare metal Kubernetes cluster. It's fine actually, because the APIs and the interface is the same. From the developer experience, the developer doesn't care where it's running, they just need to deploy their code to it. And so this is where we can get to this modern view of an internal development platform. And it's kind of where Humanitec comes in, is we've reached a level of standardization across the industry that means that the kind of experience that you have as a developer should be relatively similar, irrelevant of the company you're working for, as long as you're using these kind of core cloud native components, for example, Kubernetes, for example, various kind of open source databases, various other kind of standard services. And so what we can do now is say, well, rather than having to be a large company that goes and builds its own complicated platform to run their own infrastructure, we can come in and build that platform, and then you can use it as a company without having to build it all yourself. So you can have that developer experience where a developer can just say, I need a new environment. Just can you give me a new environment? And the platform can go and say, yeah, we understand how to, for example, deploy to another namespace in Kubernetes. We understand how to add a database to this Postgres instance. We understand how to set a DNS name up for you. And you can just do that. So the developer comes along and says, yeah, here are my needs. Can you do it? And the platform says, yeah, sure, here you go. And that gives you, as a developer, a very kind of clean experience. This has existed before. It existed in Google maybe 20 years ago. It existed in Amazon as well. But the point is now it exists for everyone else out there as well. And it's only possible because of this real development in the cloud native world and the fact that we have these core components, these, for example, Kubernetes, which acts as a common layer across any single cloud or any single bit of infrastructure you're running on. So this gives you the ability to say, hey, here is a product that anyone can use, and they can then get all of the benefits that a large company like Google has from investing a huge amount of time building their own stack.
Right. Yeah, that's yes, and from my experience, actually the standardization, that's the really interesting question here on one hand, and on the other hand, still I'm a bit wondering, before we jump into whether to like standardize or not. So what about Heroku? Or yeah, let's talk Heroku first, like full-fledged PaaS, full integration. Do you think that's an ideal place to go to, except let's say companies don't do it because they, I don't know, want more control or whatever? Or do you think there is nowadays in like Kubernetes land, actually the user experience is better than in Heroku?
So I actually want to take one step back. There's an amazing tweet, which was tweeted by Kelsey Hightower, I think like maybe even 3 or 4 years ago now. But it basically says, I'm convinced that the majority of people managing infrastructure just want a PaaS. The only requirement is it has to be built by them, right? Which I think everyone can kind of agree with. There's a certain amount of like engineering pride in actually building everything yourself. And I think that is actually probably part of the story. The other part of it is something like Heroku. My personal view is that if you're a startup or have relatively straightforward needs, then you should just use Heroku, right? It works, it scales pretty well for a certain limit on the scaling. And if you're not doing anything crazy, then it may serve your needs. And they've solved a lot of the kind of standard operational problems that you have. That's great. The question comes that when you move up the chain, so you will hit a point maybe where Heroku doesn't scale. So Heroku's costs are kind of linear. So at some point it becomes prohibitively expensive to be scaling with Heroku. And then you'll start looking at other options, or maybe you'll have certain technologies you want to use, or you want to use certain techniques which are not amenable to the Heroku setup. And in that case, you're going to have to start looking elsewhere. The question is, how can you maintain that developer experience that you had with Heroku, where developers are like, this is great, I can just literally push my code and then it appears, and I can then test it in a preview environment. That's amazing. And getting it to production is a breeze. How do you replicate that with the tooling that exists out there?
Yeah.
You throw Kubernetes into the mix, great solution, except the fact that then all of your developers suddenly have to learn Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Is your like a rock star React developer who is creating this incredible front end for you going to put the time in to actually learn how to write the YAML to create manifests, or even learn tooling around it? Are they going to learn Customize? Are they going to learn Helm? Are they going to figure out kubectl? These are all things which are a bit of a distraction to their core work.
Yeah.
And so the question is here, we want to leverage from an architectural perspective the power of Kubernetes, but we don't want to kind of regress and then suddenly give all of this extra loads to our developers, like cognitive load, extra complexity,
and
into their day-to-day life.
And we have definitely regressed, right? So with Kubernetes become, even like before Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry was a popular platform, which also focused on developer productivity. Operations people didn't like it that much. Kubernetes is a tool of the operations people that gives a reasonable user experience. However, if you also take into account like compliance requirements, CI/CD pipelines, these kind of things, Kubernetes doesn't answer, which actually makes it a better tool, because if it would try to become something like Cloud Foundry, that would make it worse. It's really great to have an ecosystem rather serving those needs. However, the ecosystem is again fragmented into many small tools, so everybody is very excitedly jumping into building up their own platform. And this is the point where I want to add the like a bit the other side of things is what we see by we keep helping companies over and over to build internal developer platforms, and we're not bored of it, and we also find companies in the need of this, is because because you can reuse what you already have. So yes, a startup can go to Heroku, probably best thing to do. But the larger the company, there is more legacy stuff, and you actually need a pathway, a step-by-step pathway forward. So, for example, 3 years ago, we started working with a German finance company on their internal developer platform based on OpenShift. OpenShift already adds a bunch of stuff on top of Kubernetes, but it was like far from enough. And actually, we incorporated Jenkins into the mix, which is really old tool, although they have added the cloud native features of running runners on Kubernetes and whatever. But it actually was really nice to reuse existing knowledge and combine that, so ease people into the new world and later replace Jenkins rather than like blow everything up and start everything from scratch. So this is and that it could be integrated with the existing logging system and so on. So so I think this is what's still driving companies to, besides the engineering pride and the not built here syndrome, is that that you want to take a step-by-step route, and getting some big platform component in actually kind of gives you this weird feeling of not being in control. So I'm a bit wondering, like, how are you guys thinking about this? How do you try to avoid like becoming the Uber platform of everything, where you sooner or later will be getting in the way of certain requirements and the flexibility?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our kind of tagline is the fastest way to build your internal developer platform. So the key thing is, from our perspective, is that Humanitec on its own is not particularly useful. You need to combine it with your internal infrastructure, your internal systems and processes that already exist. And what we try and do is to make it as easy as possible to integrate these things in. So, for example, from the ops experience of Humanitec is, I would say, relatively bare bones. So you are still responsible for setting up your infrastructure. So Humanitec is not going to set up your infrastructure. What you can do is you can teach Humanitec how to automatically provision things as needed by developers. So from that kind of side of things, we generally try not to sort of blow up the established setup, and we generally try and integrate and make sure things are put in step by step. So there's various levels of integration you can take, and you can kind of let Humanitec run with some stuff, and you might say, well, actually, we're going to look after this ourselves, and we're going to give like Humanitec very limited ability to, for example, touch our production systems, because maybe we want to manage all those ourselves, but actually Humanitec can go crazy and provision stuff for development environments. And that's a question for the ops team themselves to work out. Are they, maybe dev environments are things they don't want to spend their time on, they want to spend their time in production environments, in which case they can take that choice. I think on the flip side, if you look at it from the developer perspective, what we want to do is provide a unified developer experience. So this is purely for the developers, I'm not talking about the ops team anymore, such that it doesn't matter if the ops team changes things under the cover. So I guess a kind of easy example is if an organization wants to migrate clouds for whatever reason, maybe pricing, compliance, whatever, the ops team should be able to do that migration, and it should have almost no impact on the developer team. So the developers shouldn't have to learn any new tooling, they shouldn't have to get new logins, they shouldn't have to go on additional training. They should just be able to continue doing the work they do, and the things should work in the background. Another good use case is maybe if you're in a multi-cloud setup. So we've talked to quite a few companies which will host some bits of infrastructure in one cloud, some bits of infrastructure in another. Again, price arbitrage is a good reason, also compliance. And maybe if you're working with customers that are hosted in a particular cloud, you need to have a presence in that cloud. And from the developer perspective, again, most of the time the developer shouldn't care what cloud you're actually in, or shouldn't care that you're hosted in on-premise setup here, but you're hosted in a cloud-based setup over there. And that's really where we want to come in and provide that value. So developers have a nice, stable, and intuitive experience, but the ops team have complete freedom to set up and manage the infrastructure as they like. And they teach effectively, or like basically define rules for how Humanitec can manage all of these different infrastructures and different setups.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Sounds like there is still room left for consultants to come and configure everything.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Adam, to interrupt. There are some questions in the chat if you can take them.
No, I was planning to do the questions a bit later. We don't have actually that much to cover. One
Okay.
last question to Chris from me, and then we can actually jump on the questions. How many do we have right now?
Two.
Okay, I have 3 already from the signups. So yeah, we can then cover them all. Thanks for the reminder.
Fine.
Cool. Yeah. So where was I? Yes, we covered Heroku Cloud Foundry, and that's actually, I think, one of the questions, maybe because from the corner of my eye I saw Backstage popping up. So is Humanitec comparable to Backstage?
Yeah, so I think, so for those who don't know, Backstage is Spotify's open source internal developer platform.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. Yeah.
They call themselves a developer portal, but it's kind of the same idea. What I think is interesting is that the term developer platform can actually cover a huge range of things, and the focus of any particular tool will be different. So for example, Humanitec's focus is very much on the kind of engineering, day-to-day engineering lifecycle. So that's things like environment management, application configuration management, and that kind of side of things. Backstage is more interested in the kind of setting up and making sure that everything stays in line. So they, for example, have a very strong service catalog offering. So if you're in a large company like Spotify, you will have hundreds or thousands of services. How do you, as a developer, know where to look to find the services that might be relevant to you? If you need to add a service to the catalog, how do you do it such that it is in keeping with the same code standards and infrastructure requirements as everything else in the Spotify catalog? And then how do I access documentation on that? So Backstage focuses still on improving the developer experience, and they provide ways of booting up, effectively standing up your service and getting it running in its first environment and so on. But their focus is very much on getting that, how do we deal with thousands and thousands of services and make sure that we don't get lost in them? Whereas Humanitec is looking slightly further down on kind of like, as I'm a developer, how can I spin up a new environment to test my code? How can I get my code very quickly into staging, for example, and those kind of like day-to-day task things. So I think that's an interesting thing, is there's a lot of space in this sector to choose where your focus is. So there are different options, and I think that's actually a really interesting part.
I guess
no one size fits all.
Yeah, that's actually the two are pretty complementary in that sense, because after a certain scale, this like the service catalog problem comes up at a pretty large large scale, and I guess that makes sense that it comes from Spotify. And but the first concern always is for companies growing, where where you want to have put in the platform thinking is provisioning environments, delivery pipelines, deployment automation in a standardized way. That's the problems that always need to be solved, and that Kubernetes makes much more easier, but it doesn't actually solve them. So yeah, it's really exciting to be in this time where we have really improved the infrastructure with more flexible API-based infrastructure, and we're getting back to fixing the developer experience again, so everybody can actually have a nice time in cloud native land. Awesome. So let's jump into the audience questions, because there are some really good ones there. The first one that I have noted here, and Teresa, how will you be sharing the questions? Did you send it? Did you Slack them to me, or?
I can Slack them to you now, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so how do you see having developers on call fit with the IDP idea?
Yeah, so actually, I think internal developer platforms is actually a really good use case for on-call developers. So one of the kind of common things you'll see with an on-call team is that they will generally be a part of one of the teams, or work on or have good familiarity with one part of an application, but maybe have very little oversight of the other. So if they've spent all their time working on service A, and the on-call problem that they've been paged about is happening in service B, they'll have to then figure out how to work out what's wrong with service B. Now, what an internal developer platform does is it provides that standardized interface. So as a developer, I can jump into that application, I can look at that service, and I know, for example, where the logs are, I know where to look for the configuration, I know where to find the deployment history, I know what environments I have set up. I can even spin up a clone of my, let's say, my production environment somewhere safe where I can experiment and actually check whether what I think is a fix is actually a fix. So these kind of bits of tooling are very useful for an on-call team, because it means you don't need to be an expert in everything. You know, there's a kind of standard approach for the developer side of things.
Yeah, that's also my thinking, that where developer platforms are really important is abstracting developers away from all the details. So DevOps is a great idea in that, well, let's say, also means many things. So when I'm saying DevOps now, I mean the fact that dev teams are responsible for their production environments. And many people actually have bad experience with this for good reasons, because what it ends up with is that these development teams will have a cognitive overload of things they have to care about. Say if you just expose the AWS API to developer teams and say, yeah, do your thing now, there is the cloud. They will suddenly have to become like, have to have like 10 times more skills than they had before, 10 times, but like a lot more things to take care of and learn. But building a developer platform actually lets them take care of that production environment, but actually taking care of it means much less knowledge needed, really, because there is a monitoring system set up. There is the log aggregation is all in the right place. They have a nice interface to this environment, and also compliance stuff, like they can't actually maybe touch that environment, but can still debug what is wrong with it. So yeah, this I think the two topics are really connected, and building a nice platform really helps with it.
So I think also it's probably worth picking up on that, is that the impression might be given that an internal developer platform is just a set of automation rules to kind of mean that, hey, I don't need to interact with Kubernetes to do X, or I can just deploy by pressing this button and it goes and does, like, runs the pipeline. There's actually a lot more that's going on in terms of actually reasoning about what's happening. So what's really important for an internal developer platform is that the interface you provide is not just a kind of sort of bits of functionality that then changes a ticket into a button I click. The platform should actually be able to understand what is meant by a developer. So I'll give an example. If I want to set up some like a database or something as a developer, then I should be able to say to the platform, hey, I have a dependency on this thing. Can you go and resolve it for me? Rather than say, by the way, this is a database and it's going to be a dev database and that should be in this and so on. So that's the kind of abstraction. The other thing is that if I push an update and I change some code and I change some configuration, then the internal developer platform should be able to understand that this is a code change and a configuration change, and then play back to you what has happened. So maybe this configuration change was me saying, hey, I need a Postgres database, and I've added a load of environment variables. Oh, and I've upped the code version. So when you have this on-call question that we had before, and they say, well, actually, this was working like a few days ago. Why is it not working now? I can look back and the internal developer platform say, yeah, well, there's a new database. It was provisioned as part of this change, and this change also included a code change, and it included some environment for variable changes. By the way, you can see the same configuration in this staging environment and in this development environment. So you can then, as a developer who's on call, very quickly go back and identify what's going on, where, and in what level. So this application configuration management as well is a very key part of an internal developer platform. And so it's more than just kind of like automating your deployments. It's also reasoning about them and then allowing you to analyze what's going back in a structured and informative manner. Yeah,
good point, Chris. Next question, and we're gonna jump a little bit here because this is this one I really want to tackle here is who builds the IDP?
Right. So there's obviously many answers to this question. If you are in the world of building your own IDP, so you don't want to kind of use what's there, you're starting from scratch, then the first thing you need to do is you need to actually set up your internal developer platform team. So usually this is just shortened to platform team in most companies, and the responsibility there is to own the product. Now, once you set that team up, you may decide to use something like Backstage, something like Humanitec to kind of get you started, but you're still going to have to figure out things like integration into your infrastructure. What does it mean to set up an environment in your infrastructure compared to another company's infrastructure? The important thing is that this platform team is a full product team. It's not the part-time kind of 20% project of your ops and a couple of app developers. It needs to have, for example, product management. It needs to have some kind of SLA. It needs to have maybe even on-call support. If your development is global, then it does matter that out of hours, the application still needs to be up and running. You still need to be able to deploy applications, maybe at like Sydney time as well as at New York time. So that team internally, that product team needs to be fundamentally its own thing. And that's often what we see as problems. And I expect actually you probably have better experience with that with container solutions, but we often see that the platform team is given a mandate, but not given the resource to actually deliver that mandate. So they say, hey, this is a really cool idea. Yeah, maybe you can have like half an engineer to build that bit. And I'm sure the ops team have some spare cycles they can help to throw into like, help set this thing up. And that's where we often see these things fail. So when people have bad experience with kind of internal platforms, internal developer platforms especially, it's often because the investment in that hasn't gone high enough. And that actually comes to a good reason why things like Backstage and Humanitec exist, is that it's expensive to actually put in the effort and dedicate those resources to build them out. So take as many shortcuts as you can. You know, if there's stuff that's already out there, build on that rather than building everything from scratch, because you can reduce, you know, maybe a 1-year project to maybe a 3-month project to get you into a place where your developers can start using this across your company.
Yeah, and when we come to this idea of like platform, yes, have a platform team who maintains the platform. So, and for this, I would really recommend people to check out our previous What the Fuck in our guest Matthew Skelton's book about team topologies, which really explains this concept well of why a platform needs a platform team. And sometimes when the company is large enough, you even need marketing, because you will not want it. You can't just force this on people to use the platform. You will want to market this to them. So it's not that easy to even get the message through, the documentation, the everything. It's actually, yeah, you need to manage features, product backlog, all that stuff. It's actually a lot of work before it starts paying off. Yeah, so there is the question, does it work for smaller companies, e.g. 20, 30 developers?
So I can give you a kind of very easy answer, which is yes. And a good example would be Humanitec. So we're not a giant, like 1,000 engineer company. We use our own internal dev platform, and it definitely helps us day to day kind of running our infrastructure and running our application, which is the Humanitec application. So we're kind of self-referentially running it ourselves and ourselves. But yeah, so I think the advantages are smaller. So the wins are smaller because of the smaller teams. But I think the question to ask yourself is, how much cognitive load do you want to take off your developers? What we often see is startups, the kinds of engineers who are in startups are generally generalists, full stack people who are probably entirely happy with delving into Kubernetes 1 minute and then debugging a React application the next minute. And if that's the case, great. Maybe if you're on Kubernetes, it's not too much of an issue in the short term. But as you get bigger and as you hire more people, you're going to hire more specialist people. And from a developer perspective, it'll become more and more important to be able to support your developers in doing their day-to-day coding work and not having to learn bits of infrastructure and so on. So
actually, it might not be that healthy to have the full stack engineers be building the infrastructure platform and everything. I've seen that happen in startups, and when you ask yourself the question of why, then there is no good answer really. Like there is but more important things to build it. And then actually, on the other hand, on a small company, the build versus buy decision, I think, shifts more towards buy, because there is much less legacy, much less things to incorporate, to take into account and whatever. And you can't really afford maybe a platform team. So platform team is already like something a larger company needs to support them. So actually, and then like getting a more or less ready-made platform is a good idea. And we have another question here that is really interesting. Are you pushing back into the separation of dev and ops by throwing up a wall between the dev for the environment? You're literally building the silo back up again, right? Right.
We hear a lot of this. So what we're trying to do is actually provide a system for people to actually have conversations that matter and not conversations that don't matter. So I think, as actually Adam mentioned it before, is that just because you say we're doing DevOps and ops are working with dev, if your communication is tickets to the ops team in order to get stuff done, that's actually not very useful. It's very kind of low value communication. It's very transactional, and you're not actually solving the problem.
Sorry, just to interject here. That includes if you're sitting next to each other and keep talking. That is also disruptions and just grabbing other people all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the thing is to understand is that what you want to get to a situation of is that when the devs and the ops team are talking, they're talking about things like, how do we architect our infrastructure because we have this requirement that's coming in. So we need to, 10x our load because we've just signed this massive contract. How do we, as a shared team, solve that problem? And not have the developers shooting a load of tickets across saying, oh yeah, by the way, can we increase the size of our node pools because we think we've got this big traffic coming in and we're really worried that we're going to scale, blah, blah, blah. What you want is you want people to actually talk about what matters, and then they can go off and do the things that they're good at. So we're not saying that devs should talk to ops. In fact, we'll say the opposite. You should definitely talk to each other, but you should talk about stuff that matters, like what you're trying to achieve, not, hey, can you do this for me? I need to create a ticket. Why haven't you done my ticket? I've been waiting 3 days for this database. Where is it? Which is often communication. And that's not useful, and it's frustrating for everyone. So if you can allow the dev team to be self-service on the stuff that they don't need to send transactional conversations of, then there'll be more time to actually talk about the big picture.
Yeah, exactly. And honest, yeah, so in a way, like if you're thinking platform team, then there needs to be a wall. Like the platform team can't be just pulled into whatever devs need at the moment. It will be features going on a backlog, implemented someday when they become priority. So that there is that aspect to it. But the platform team is not really ops. So the platform team's job is not to like help you get something deployed or whatever. The platform team's job is to provide standard services that everybody in the company uses. So it is a bit of a least common denominator where you won't build a feature for just one team. But to be able to scale your operations, this is a necessary evil to do. Right. Let me check. Oh yeah, there's one related question, and I think we should do this before going to others that are in a bit different area. Can't you just do that standardization by having best practices across a company?
I think that the great answer to this is, in theory, yes, and in practice, that never works. Right? If you have any number of engineers, even if you have the standards written down on like a shared wiki that said, hey, when you create this service, you do it like this. When you create namespace in your Kubernetes cluster, you need to follow this convention. Please set your RBAC roles like this. It might work much of the time, but as long as there is free kind of freedom for interpretation, you're going to end up with diversion, and that diversion builds over time. And that eventually leads to inconsistencies, and it leads to, for example, the on-call nightmare of discovering this other application, which is subtly but not obviously different in some way. Like it has, it's running under a different set of accounts, service accounts in Kubernetes, which means that stuff breaks in a different way than you're expecting because in your cluster the configuration is a little bit different. That kind of problem, those kind of small subtle problems, are things you have when you kind of just try and get everyone to agree on stuff, and you kind of allow people to make mistakes or kind of make decisions on the way.
And honestly, Chris, I would disagree with you there. I don't think there would be subtle differences, and I don't think that in theory this could work. Maybe in a very small company, yes, but people will reinvent the wheel. They will actually go crazy and they will not read the docs. So that's not a scalable approach. That's yeah, you can get away with it for a certain scale, but sooner or later you need to codify things. That's, well, we developers do that, right? We and all that actually the effort that goes into the product management of an internal developer platform, those are all company decisions that instead of getting written down in a wiki, actually get written down in code, which is much better.
So one way that I like to think about it is like linters. So I don't know if anyone with kind of longer memories, if you were coding more than probably 10, maybe 15 years ago, almost nobody used a linter, and it definitely wasn't part of any kind of CI tooling if you were using CI tooling at that time, which meant that everyone was writing their own code with their own style. And when you did code reviews, half of the fights would actually just be about the way the code is formatted, which, like, people love having that conversation, but it is not constructive in any way. Then linters came along that enforced code style, and all of a sudden those conversations disappeared because the system would tell you, oh no, when you write this line, you have to put your curly brace at the end of the line, and you're not allowed to have a trailing semicolon. And by the way, this and this and this. And people fight it initially, and then they actually just follow it because it's not worth fighting. And actually it moves things along faster. And that means that when you have a developer moving onto your code base, it looks the same as the code they were using on the other side of the company, and you get all of that great sort of structure. An internal developer platform provides the same thing, but at the level of your infrastructure and the way that your applications are fitted together, not just at the code level.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's a very good analogy. Okay, yeah, we've gone through the challenging questions. Now let's do some curious ones. What are some suggestions for a company to start looking at this approach? What are some low-hanging fruits that could be POC'd in a small amount of time? I think that's a really, really good question.
It's a very, very broad question. So I think probably need to make some assumptions here. So one of the things I will kind of make an assumption of at the moment is that you have multiple applications or multiple services running. So as that is one of the kind of benefits of kind of internal development platform is you can standardize across things. When you're looking into this kind of stuff, what we tend to see is that the companies that are successful at this start small. So they'll take a particular application and say, okay, how do we make this setup best in class for our developer? How do we improve the developer experience around that? And then literally you do the legwork of like requirements discovery. You go and you interview people. If you're really sophisticated, you will literally do user testing of how to do your development right now. How does the development lifecycle for this developer work? How do they deploy? How do they work out how to set up a new environment? All of those things, and you can feed that in. You're starting small. You can then maybe iterate on a particular tool. Maybe you will decide to use something like Humanitec. Try it out on that team. See if that application works and whether it provides value. At that point, you now have something you can compare against. And what we find is really interesting is that if you set up something that works with a small team, other teams get interested because they're like, how come these guys are so much happier over there when they're doing deployments and spinning up new environments? We want what they're having. And then you can start to see this thing moving through. What we tend to see doesn't work is diktats that there will be an internal development platform. Most companies are not run like Amazon, so top-down diktats like that run through the entire company might not always work. So I would say start small and try and grow it organically. Don't try and kind of design the ultimate platform for everybody on day one and try and apply it across those, because it's going to be too much work and there's going to be too many moving parts for you to actually keep a handle on.
Yeah, that's yeah, exactly. And Matthew writes in team topologies about like make the platform non-mandatory, make it optional to use. And when nobody wants to use it, and then think about why, because that will drive you into this UX thinking of like what do our users need, and what do we need to give them to adopt this? Because also there are tremendous amount of things an internal developer platform could do, and you will not be able to provide all of those things. So you will actually need to be prioritizing, like with any product. I'm pretty sure even if you use an out-of-the-box solution, there will be things to set up first and later, and some things you never get around to, and so on. So it's yeah, this platform product thinking actually is, I think, the most important takeaway, and that's why I really like that we have a term for this now, that's this term groups the whole thinking on this, so that there is platform in it and developers, because that's who we are focusing on really, and that it's an internal platform. So it's not about trying to build something that will be like good for everybody, but it's for your own organization, which is unique. And maybe at some point we will invent the Kubernetes of internal developer platforms. It will be just the thing that everybody uses, and maybe Humanitec becomes that someday, who knows? But like but for now it's fine to think of your own company and your own requirements and build something. And on that note, I think we are getting to the close. Any final remarks, Chris?
Yeah, so I think this is definitely something that's worth thinking about, and it's worth asking yourself with a kind of product hat on what problems you're trying to solve for your engineering team, and then with your engineering hat on, how do you actually go about implementing this? What is the most effective way of solving those problems for your engineers? And even if you're not interested in building an internal development platform yourself, I think just doing that exercise is very useful, because it'll tell you a lot about how your engineering organization actually functions. and you can learn a lot from that exercise. And after the exercise, you may even decide that you do want to dip your toe in the world of internal development platforms.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for joining us today on the What the Fuck in Our series. I hope we managed to answer the big question of what the fuck are internal developer platforms. We do have a question here if there is a good use case of an IDP that we can read somewhere, and this is the good moment to mention that Container Solutions, together with Humanitec, we actually produced a white paper on internal developer platforms, which I would like to ask Teresa to share in the chat together with 2 other links would like to share. So first of all, IDP white paper should answer a lot of the questions. There is the history, there are use cases, and a lot of thinking around and architecture patterns for internal developer platforms. So if you are new to the topic, that should definitely be very interesting. The second announcement is that actually both me and Chris happen to be on another panel next week called GitOps from the Trenches, which will be focusing on GitOps instead of IDPs. We will do this together with Viktor Farsik from CodeFresh. So that should be a really nice discussion too. So we will be discussing actual use cases of GitOps and how it worked out in our professional experience. So very hands-on, not that much theory. And finally, the next episode of the What the Fuck in Our series is going to be What the Fuck is VMware Tanzu? We will be discussing VMware's all-encompassing Kubernetes platform that they are building, and we'll be having a guest from VMware, James Waters. So thank you very much for sharing the links, Teresa, and thank you very much everybody for coming here this evening, and especially Chris for joining us for this session. And I wish everybody a really nice evening.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Bye.